But hello and welcome. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name's Chris Cruz, and I'm the Director of Cloud Marketing here at InterVision. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for joining our webinar today on how to optimize your AWS investment. I'm really excited about the content that our subject matter experts have put together for you, and I think you're going to find today's conversation insightful. For those of you who aren't aware of who InterVision is, we are a strategic service provider with a comprehensive portfolio of services and solutions that are designed to support our clients at every phase of their cloud journey. And really, when I think about why our clients choose to work with us, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we have a 25-year legacy of supporting very demanding organizations in their data centers with technology and services. And we couple that with a decade of experience supporting clients in the cloud. And I think that's reflected as our status as a premier AWS partner with all the credentials and accreditations that you would expect. So really, we're excited today to be talking specifically about optimizing the investment you've made in AWS. It's an important thing to be thinking about no matter how mature you are into the cloud. And it's an area that we're starting to see many folks be challenged with. So we hope that the conversation today is insightful. If we can move to the next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the agenda. But before I go into the agenda itself, I wanted to just get a few housekeeping items out of the way. First and foremost, you can use either the Q&A functionality or the chat functionality to ask any questions you might have about today's conversation. And I'll personally do my best to make sure that your questions get addressed at a timely fashion. There will also be a more formal Q&A at the end of the session, but please, we like these to be interactive, so do not hesitate to ask any questions. Secondly, we often get asked about recordings of the session, and we will make sure that that is made available to you. InterVision will send a recording on to you so you can review or share the recording as you see fit within your organization. And then finally, for those of you who find today's conversation insightful and maybe want to talk a little bit more about our services and solutions as they relate to cost optimization, we'll be sharing some contact information at the end of the session to make sure that you have someone you can reach out to if you're not already working with one of our InterVision sales representatives. So on to the actual topics here. Today, we're going to be talking again about optimizing your AWS investment. We're going to open things up with some industry insights, just things that we've learned talking to our clients, doing our research, understanding the market. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the process of optimizing your AWS cost investments and really try to deliver some key takeaways for you that you can take and implement within your organization. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about our approach. How do we approach cost optimization? We have a very comprehensive service that has a guarantee attached to it that we'll be talking about a little bit as well. And then finally, just to touch lightly on next steps and ways you can engage with InterVision and move the conversation forward. So if we can move on to the next slide, I can introduce our speakers for today. So as you can see here in their credentials, both of these gentlemen are very qualified to talk on this subject. So I'll just really give you sort of my personal perspective from working very, very closely with them. I have the distinct pleasure of working with both John and David on a daily basis as they build the services and solutions that we use to support our clients. And the one thing that always stands out for me for both of these guys is they're always client first, right? How can we better serve our clients? How can we deliver solutions that are better equipped to deliver the results that our clients are really after? And I'm in these conversations every day, and that is always front and center with both of these guys. But John really represents our executive level as our CTO, really forward thinking. What do we need to be doing in the cloud to support our clients? How can we better serve them? And David is really focused on creating solutions and putting the pieces together to make sure we're fulfilling and delivering on those results. So two really great guys, really, really sharp guys. And with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to John and let the actual smart people start talking.
Thanks, Chris, and hi everyone. So yeah, it's good to be here and talk about this topic because this is something that really impacts most businesses at this point. Because most businesses, most organizations are reliant on technology, increasingly so, particularly since the COVID hit and everybody's working remote and pushing more into the cloud and into AWS. So, this is an important topic and increasingly so to everybody who's in business, really. So, going across different subject best practice organizations that we talk to, controlling cloud costs is the number one challenge for folks who are adopting the cloud. And most companies are adopting the cloud. They've got workloads in there. Maybe some of them, are still moving a lot of applications up into the cloud. But controlling costs again and again is what we hear from our client base as the biggest challenge. And why is this? What makes it so difficult? So, on the next slide, I really look at the different areas of what makes cost optimization in the cloud challenging. It's quite different, right? Once you move into the cloud, you're no longer buying servers, something you might do every 3 years or 5 years. So it's not as tangible. The great thing about the cloud is you can spin things up and shut them down, but it is challenging to see what you have at any point in time. And then you get a bill at the end of the month with, dozens and dozens or hundreds of items on it. Trying to relate that to what you've got going on. You may have underutilized resources that people spun up to do some testing and they're not using them anymore. So kind of cloud sprawl, you may not know, so can you turn it off? What do you do? That kind of speaks to governance, management, and the process of who controls creation of resources in the cloud. Oftentimes we see this a lot. Folks are moving quickly to get into the cloud. To get there, they oversize deployments to get the performance they need, which can make sense to get in there. But then you've got to come back and change the architecture, or you're going to continue to overspend. You may be undersized in certain ways. So architecture is a challenging area. Forecasting is so much different in the cloud because you're paying utility based. You're paying after you use it typically, like you pay for your cell phone, and you're looking at it and go, oh my God, what do we spend over here? How come we have so much compute? What data transfer? So it all of this combined makes for a different challenge, right? So really quite a different discipline to what you had before with capacity planning, where if you bought a whole bunch of servers, 100 servers, and you actually found that you had too many, you could in fact sell them off, right? But much more sort of, serial in the way you went about that, much more sequential. This is much more challenging in many ways. But, once you get a handle on it, it is controllable, and we'll get into that later. So a little more in how we look at this across the industry on the next slide. Again, we look to a lot of organizations to help us really understand what our clients are seeing, and well over half recognize that they are overspending. Probably more are overspending, but don't necessarily fully recognize it yet. About half of the folks, we look at, it's a major challenge. For CIOs, again, pretty much half of them are focused on this, focused on cost reduction as being number one reason to get into the cloud. But then once you get into the cloud, you can find that your costs have gone up. You're struggling to get everything over and set up correctly. You're getting suboptimal service levels. So it can be a great way as a CIO to get a job or to, get the next big project, move into the cloud, and it can be a sure way to get fired if you're in this constant overspend mode and you haven't gotten everything out there. So definitely something that needs to be focused on. So I know that sort of paints a pretty sort of doom and gloom picture, but on the next slide, kind of think about the different aspects of what you've got that you need to focus on. The biggest issue really is that money spent in a given month is lost, right? You can't get it back in the cloud OpEx model. So you need to be moving because you can't get that money back. Issues compound over time. If you don't start to get control of it, it becomes more and more of a burden to tackle. Migrations can stall or be canceled. It can erode, and often does, executive confidence, which can leave you in a situation where you've got part of your workloads in the cloud and part not. Really, definitely not where you want to be. So, what can you do about this? Let me, give you an example of one of the clients we've worked with for a long time. If you can move to the next slide here. We've moved one of the largest community colleges in the US into the cloud about 5 years ago. And the initial movement into the cloud saved them a ton of money because they had a ton of on-prem hardware that was set up for their very large peaks in, when students came and applied and things like that. So just moving into the cloud saved them, 10 to 1 initially. And their workloads, we didn't even have time to optimize them for the cloud at the time, but still saving a lot of money. Now, in recent times, budgets have gotten tighter, even though they're saving a lot of money here, and that, we've come back to work with them to help look for additional savings. And in the last 12 months, we've been able to find hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional savings for them by, doing some of the things that Dave is going to talk about here in the future. So, in the next few slides. So, it's not all a negative. There are ways to achieve great cost savings, both in the short term and in the long term. And while you're doing it, you can improve security, you can improve performance, you can make your operations more resilient, you can improve disaster recovery, and you can innovate. So all of these things are very much achievable, but it takes some time and some organization and some focus. So with that, let me pass you on to David, who will get into more details on how we go about this typically.
Okay, can you hear me, John?
Hear loud and clear.
All right. Hey, well, first of all, thank you everybody for joining today, and congratulations. I'm going to go on a limb here and assume that if you're joining a webinar in cloud cost optimization, that you are in fact in the cloud. So with that comes all kinds of benefits. Cloud scales of economy, the ability to scale up and down, but it also has a few challenges. So the good news is capacity management is no longer your problem, it's somebody else's problem. Bad news is you've got access to unlimited resources, and without paying attention to those resources and what's going on there, your prices and your cost of your environment is likely to spiral. So today we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can address the potential for optimizing your cloud costs and environment. So first thing I want to do is talk about AWS. AWS recognizes this dynamic that you've got the ability to basically spin up and spin down unlimited resources, on demand. But that can also create its own challenges. And so AWS has put together a series of best practices, and one of them is the well-architected framework. And within that framework is the cloud cost optimization pillar. Okay, so they spent a lot of time thinking about this. They've created a lot of tools, white papers, really good stuff out there. And I recommend as a starting point, if you're just beginning on the process of optimizing cloud, is you just pull up that AWS well-architected framework, CCO, best practices, white paper, which will really kind of help, guide your stuff. But I'm going to talk about a few of the highlights from that, because I think it'll really sort of set up the discussion here. I'm not going to drain the slide, but there's a few areas that I want to point out. One is functional ownership, cloud financial management, governance, monitoring cost and usage, and pricing models. Those are some of the most critical things that you can address when it comes to maintaining your costs in the cloud. And then pretty much everything else on this slide has to do with what I consider architectural changes. Some are major, some are minor, some are real easy, quick fixes, and others require some design activities. But essentially, that is the AWS best practices for optimizing cloud in a nutshell. So we're going to go through this. I'm going to talk about AWS best practices. I'm also going to share some interesting nuggets that we've picked up over the years in doing these types of cloud cost optimization engagements. So as John mentioned, there are a number of challenges when it comes to aligning to best practices for cost optimization in the cloud. First and foremost is your organization's level of cloud maturity. So some organizations are well down the path and have created a cost-aware culture and have basically delegated cloud optimization to the development teams and the business units that actually are running there. Others are not at that level. So it really can depend upon the level of your cloud maturity when it comes to addressing this issue. The second is the size and the complexity of the environment. If you are running a large environment that's spread across multiple regions and have a variety of different services involved, that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge than a smaller single region environment just because of all the complexity. Another challenge is the migration approach. So most legacy applications that have been migrated to the cloud are done via a lift and shift approach. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But first and foremost is that it's the most cost-effective way to get into the cloud. So you take your on-prem app, you migrate it to the cloud, and that's great. And you probably save some money. Your CapEx expenditures have gone way down. But unfortunately, that app may not be optimized for the cloud. It might not be able to use any of the elastic type features that are in the cloud. So that can result in challenges when it comes to optimizing cloud costs. Another challenge is pricing complexity. So anyone that's ever looked at a bill from AWS or really any cloud provider knows exactly what I'm talking about. You can buy one service that might have 4 or 6 different line items on the bill, and understanding where those line items go and how to allocate them can become a challenge real quick. And then lastly, when it comes to optimizing costs, the skill sets that are those people in your organization that are best able to optimize cloud costs tend to also be those same folks that are engaged in projects that are either revenue generating or they're releasing new services or they're doing stuff that brings in money or helps release new products quickly. And because of that, a lot of times cost optimization is not prioritized to the extent that some of these other projects that they're working on. So it really becomes a challenge because you've got the same group of people doing 2 different things and one gets prioritized over the other. So first step, when it comes to optimizing cloud, you got to begin at the beginning. And the beginning is essentially establishing ownership of the cost optimization function. We've seen this over and over with companies out there. Those that are good with cloud cost optimization have actually designated resource. They've decided ownership within the organization to say, hey, listen, this is part of your role. And I want you to review these, this set of stuff, once a month, once a quarter, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a dedicated resource, but actually by assigning ownership and making sure that someone is responsible for this, it actually has a big impact on your ability of the organization to improve over time. So that is key. Now, some organizations have actually moved beyond that. They don't just have a cost optimization function. They actually have a cost-aware culture where the deployment and the delivery of services is delivered in an optimal fashion because the people actually delivering those applications have the tools, the resources, and most importantly, the time to focus on cost optimization. But whatever your process is, whether it's establishing designated resources to work on this, or you're gonna fan it out to the entire organization, it's important to actually have ownership. So that's really step 1. Okay, now at the risk of appearing to sound like Captain Obvious, I need to talk about tagging. So I'm sure everybody on this call knows what tagging is, but just in case, tagging is basically metadata that you assign to a resource. It's a key value pair. So your key could be host name and your value could be server one, or your key could be unit, a business unit, and your value could be marketing, right? And what's important is that if you are trying to allocate costs back to different business units or different applications within the organization, you have to use tagging, and you have to be consistent in your approach to tagging. So it's really important. It provides visibility, and AWS actually makes it really easy. I shouldn't say it makes it easy. It makes it easier to do tagging because they provide tools like cost allocation tags. So there's a couple different kinds. One is system generated and the other is user defined. And for these to work, you actually have to enable them. You got to go into the portal, enable these cost allocation tags. But then once you've done that, it makes it easy to apply these tags every time you're deploying resources. So system generated tag is great because it's always going to include a tag for created by. So you're going to know who created that resource. And that's great for helping to identify resources, where they belong, what business unit. And then the other one are user defined. And those are typically things like business unit or application. But what's really important about tagging is if you can trace it back to a business unit or an application, you can hold that business unit or that application owner accountable for their cloud costs. It's also really important to identify production assets versus test dev assets. Because what's critical there is sometimes dev environments don't need to be running 24/7. So if you know it's a dev environment, that makes it easier to evaluate whether or not you should implement something like scheduling, right? Where those resources turn on during business hours and they turn off after business hours. If you do scheduling, if you implement scheduling, you can save 70% over running that resource 24/7. And all that starts with tagging. Same thing for a proof of concept. A lot of times companies will spin up, some resources for a proof of concept, and then it may go dark, or it may go dormant, or it may get deprioritized in favor of something else. But if you tag that resource and you know it's related to a proof of concept or to a project that's no longer being actively worked, you can identify those resources. You can either shut them off or take a snapshot of the EBS volumes and delete the resources. So there's a lot of different ways that you can benefit from using tagging, but it's really important. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So when it comes to the next step, and this is kind of a related topic, is governance, right? So we talked about tagging. Tagging basically helps you assign assets, cloud assets, to business units and applications, and that's great. But you really need governance to ensure that these things are happening the way they should. So governance is about really tracking costs at the business unit level and at the application level, monitoring and generating alerts for usage and forecasting. So it's great to actually have these dashboards, but if you don't pull them up every day, you may not be, you don't want to be surprised at the end of the month if there is a difference from what you were expecting and what you got. So it's important to set up alerts to make sure that your cloud spend is on track for what you're expecting. And next is establishing a process to review resource utilization. And this really goes to establishing a cost optimization function within your organization. So if you've got a process, if you've got an owner of this and they have a process, you're well on your way to making sure that you're looking at this on a regular basis and identifying ways that you can actually go in and optimize costs. And then last but not least is basically tools that AWS has enabled that help you provide governance in your environment. And then there's a couple of key tools here. One is service control policies, which are part of AWS organizations. So most companies, most customers that we talk to these days are actually already running AWS organizations. AWS organizations is a way to provide centralized account management and consolidated billing across all of your accounts in an AWS environment. But they also have a feature called service control policies, and SCPs, as the acronym is, are great for putting guardrails or limits on the actions that can be taken in an account. So, for example, you can establish SCPs to prevent deployment of resources in regions that are more expensive, regions that you have no reason to actually deploy resources in. You can require specific EC2 instances that are going to run in a test dev environment to be deployed as a T2 micro, as opposed to any other larger type of instance. You can specify low-tier storage in test dev environments. So there's a lot of ways that you can use SCPs to minimize costs. I like to say, make it easy to do the right thing or make it hard to do the thing that's not in your organization's best interest. So SCPs are a great way for that. But also what they can do is create tag policies, right? So you can either decide that, if I don't have a tag policy that you can't, if this resource is not tagged, I can't deploy it, or you can alert after the fact. SCPs are great for ensuring that tags are being applied consistently and uniformly across the organization. And then lastly is AWS Config. It's a configuration management tool that's provided by AWS, but they can absolutely alert on situations where you don't have tagged resources. So both of those are great in terms of being able to provide cloud cost governance. All right, next is pricing models. So pricing models are one of the biggest ways that you can actually save money in the cloud. So, on the one hand, the beauty of the cloud and what attracts most people to the cloud in the first place is the ability to spin up and spin down demand, spin up and spin down resources on demand. But unfortunately, that's also the most expensive way to deploy cloud resources. So AWS has basically 4 different pricing models: on demand, reserved instances, savings plans, and spot instances. So reserved instances and savings plans are basically committed resources that you're signing up a term for for 1 or 3 years. And those can save you up to 72% off of the on-demand price. And then spot instances are also great. You can actually save even more money off of, if you deploy spot instances, as long as your application can handle being terminated with no notice. So that's part of the deal. So with the spot interest, you put a bid price in, and if the market price is above the bid price, you get to hold that instance as long as your bid is higher than the market price. But if that reverses, you lose your instance, the application terminates. So it can be great for test dev environments, for back-end batch processing, things like that, but certainly not something you'd want to use in a production environment unless you've written your application to handle that type of unexpected termination of resources. So for most types of production environments, you're really looking at maximizing your reserved instance or savings plans. And in general, there's a couple of different ways that they do this. You've got standard plans and convertible plans. So standard plans basically are fixed when it comes to things like instance size, region, operating system, and that sort of stuff. Savings plans or convertible plans are more flexible in that you can convert from one instance to the next, especially if you're using like a EC2 reserved instance. You can basically resell that if it's convertible in the EC2 instance marketplace and get a new instance in another family. So there's a way to basically sell back unused RIs should you be there. Savings plans, though, are a little bit easier. Is instead of committing to a specific resource, you're committing to a spend level in compute. And that can apply to both EC2 instances or Lambda or Fargate. So it's a great thing. It's a great way to actually get the benefits of a committed purchase option without having to commit to a specific instance. The only potential downside of a savings plan is that there's no way to resell that back. So if you committed to $50,000 a month and you're spending 45, it's a sunk cost. So the trick here is to maximize the amount of commitment level that you have, and you want to go right up to that level, but not too much. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is not an either-or proposition. You can actually have reserved instances on specific workloads that are predictable, that are stable, that you're going to keep around for years. And then you can use savings plans to basically cover that other spend that's committed, but it's not necessarily tied to a specific region or a specific type of EC2 instance and that sort of stuff. So highly recommend going this route because it can save you a ton of money. And it's one of the best ways to save money in the cloud. AWS actually provides a couple of tools to make it simple and easy for you to decide you should apply this. So AWS Cost Explorer has RI purchase recommendations. So it's right there, it's right on the box, it's a free tool. So that's a great way to look at your workloads and say, hey, you know, I could save money right here by purchasing a reserved instance. So there's the cost and utilization report is a great resource for identifying cost savings. And then AWS budgets is a great tool to not only look at the forecasted spend and get alerts when you're not at that forecasted spend or when you're expected to see that forecasted spend, but also it can send alerts for RI utilization and coverage. So can let you know if you're dropping below a specific commitment level, and then you can go in and say, okay, what happened? Oh, I see one of my RIs just dropped off. Now I need to, you know, repurchase it or do something like that. So definitely some great native tools out there, but the key here is trying to optimize your pricing model, because that's going to save you the most money in the cloud.
Hey, David, as
Yes.
you're before you transition out of that specific one, we've actually had quite a few questions come in privately about our service and our approach. I think you're going to touch on the majority of them in the next section. However, we did have someone ask, does everything need to go to savings plans? Is this the best option? I think trying to distinguish between the options you covered.
No, because it really depends. So if you use an AWS compute savings plan, what's great about that is there's no overhead, there's no management overhead for basically exchanging one RI for another convertible RI and reselling that. So it really minimizes your management overhead, but you're not going to get that same level of discount. If you go to an RI, you could save 72% on a reserved instance. And if you know you're going to need that M4 large for this mission critical application for 4 years, it might be better to purchase an RI for those particular, you know, high dollar instances, so you can maximize your costs there, and then use a savings plan to commit to a certain spend level. So it really just, it kind of depends on, you know, this can be a time-consuming task. If you're managing just RIs and you're trying to exchange in the marketplace and you don't have somebody dedicated to that, you know, or you don't have, I should say, you don't have enough resources dedicated to that, then you should think about savings plans, because from an administrative standpoint, it's a lot easier. But if you're trying to maximize your savings, it's typically going to be a combination of the two. So we can talk more offline. I'm happy to have one-on-ones with anybody. We can get some of our FinOps experts on the line to talk about how you can maximize that. But generally, it's not an either-or proposition. It's a both and. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about architectural changes. And this is another big way to save money when it comes to optimizing costs in the cloud. So I break down architectural changes into 3 different categories. You've got what I call cloud hygiene, quick wins, and then design changes. So cloud hygiene are things like unattached EBS volumes, obsolete snapshots, unattached elastic IP addresses, and EC2 instances with no network activity in the last week. All right, so it's a pretty easy to go and scan for that stuff and say, okay, you know, what are we doing here, right? But these things can be pretty quickly either deleted, or if you're afraid to delete that EBS volume, take a snapshot of it, push it to S3, and you're going to save a ton of money by having it in S3 versus having it as an EBS volume. But these are pretty what I call cloud hygiene. This is just a matter of, you know, looking at your cloud environment at least once a month, going through and seeing, you know, what is no longer necessary, because applications change over time and resources change over time. And if you're not looking for these zombie type resources, they're just going to continue to pile up. Second is what I call quick wins, and that's things like right sizing EC2 and RDS instance sizes. So if you deployed your application to the cloud and you're running an M4 large and you no longer need that size, you're wasting money every month. So looking at resource utilization, and those can change, you know, month to month, year to year. But the important thing is application use patterns will change over time. And so, you know, just because it was right sized 6 months ago doesn't mean you actually have the right size. So keep kind of looking at that stuff. Identify scheduling opportunities. This is huge. As I mentioned earlier, if you've got a development environment that doesn't need to run 24/7, use AWS Instance Scheduler. It can shut down the entire environment and bring it back up during business hours and shut it down when it's no longer necessary. So scheduling is a great way to do that. Optimizing storage, making sure that you've enabled either the ability to use storage lifecycle policies or intelligent tiering for storage so that you're not spending money on a storage tier that you don't need. And then data transfer review. This is another big one, is you've got data, and if you've got multiple availability zones inside your environment, every time data goes from AZ1 to AZ2, you're spending money. If you've got EC2 instances talking to S3 buckets, that costs you money because it's going across the internet. So one of the ways you can optimize that is enabling a VPC endpoint on that S3 bucket. It keeps all the traffic internal, and you've now saved money, and you don't have to pay for this data transfer service. So there's a bunch of different ways, that you can save money by looking at data transfer costs and making sure that you're not paying for data transfer that you don't need to. And then the third category is really design changes. And this one is, these are really more bigger, potentially more dramatic changes in the environment. But most of the ones I'm talking about are looking at ways to use cloud native type features in your environment. So what you want to do with this one here is start with analyzing the workload. So look at the workload, look at its use patterns, look at its response times in terms of requests. What is the normal response time? What is the maximum amount of response time that can happen? What you want to do is look at your high value workloads. So look at those workloads that are either bringing in money to the company or costing the company a lot of money. Because it would be pretty hard to do this to every one of your applications running in the cloud. But start with your high value workloads, analyze them for usage patterns. So do they have a wide variety in usage? Are there variations in demand? Does demand peak in the morning and it's a drop off in the afternoon? Is the demand predictable? If you have predictable changes in demand, then you can save a ton of money by either doing time-based auto-scaling or demand-based auto-scaling by spinning up and spinning down those resources as needed. But it's not just about auto-scaling. You can also look at potentially smoothing out the demand for resources. So if you have, let's say that you've got demand that's kind of spotty, you can smooth out demand if your application can handle it using things like API Gateway to set up throttling so that you can actually have a more, a smooth level of demand coming in. And that works great as long as your application supports retries. If it doesn't support retries, then queuing is probably a better option. But both of those options allow you to smooth out the demand for resources so that you don't have to deploy as many resources at a time. You can kind of smooth that out. And again, there's caveats to all this stuff, but what you want to do is start by looking at your high value workloads that cost money and identify those that have the biggest changes in demand. That's where you're most likely to save money when it comes to doing some of these design changes. And these design changes aren't necessarily a whole rewrite of the application, but what they can do is allow you to benefit from some cloud native features that allow you to match workload demand with the resources. So, okay, I know that I'm kind of running short here, so I'm going to kind of speed this up. But last thing that I want to mention on architectural changes is never delay a one-time cost because it's not on the budget this month when it could result in savings month after month after month after month. So if you spend $10,000 extra this month, but it's going to save you, $4,000 every month for the next 4 months, that's something that's definitely worth your time. And so some of these changes in your application can be sort of incremental. They don't have to be, boil the ocean type of changes or throw the whole thing out and start from scratch. But what you're looking for is a way to make modifications to the app that make it more cloud native and cloud friendly. And this is ideal for those applications that are high value. So, okay, so everything I've just talked about is something that you guys can do yourself. We use in our practice primarily native AWS tools, and you can do that as well. AWS has a number of tools and white papers on how to do this. But the most important thing is dedicating the time. and the resources to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our approach to cloud cost optimization. Starts off with a 30% guarantee. So essentially what that means is we will look at your spend, we'll establish a baseline, and we will use the methods that I just went through to save you 30%. And that's things like cloud hygiene. That's things like quick wins, data transfer review, looking for ways that we can chop your monthly spend down on resources. And we've actually done this before and been able to achieve 30% savings for customers. So it's something that we're very confident in, and we're happy to talk more about that. The other thing to remember about this is that there's almost a near immediate return on investment. So whichever model you choose, we've got a couple of different ways to purchase this. But it's almost a near immediate return on investment. If you spend, like I said in my previous example, $10,000 this month and it saves you $4,000 a month for the next 4 months, you know, your ROI is going to be great, and it's giving you near immediate. Next thing is that it can help you to offload cost management burden. So let's say that you've got a small shop, you don't really have resources that you can designate to own this function, you know, we can help with that. Or if your cloud resources are in demand working on mission critical projects, you can't pull them off to do some, you know, cloud hygiene, you know, that's a great opportunity for a look at a third party like Innovision to go in and provide this type of service for you. And, you know, the last thing that our service can do is provide an optimized foundation. Go in, you know, do a new baseline, get you to where you need to be, show you the tools that we use, and help you, you know, become self-sufficient in optimizing your cloud going forward. So the way that we do this, our approach is essentially people, process, and technology. So we have folks that have been doing cloud optimization type of engagements for years. They're highly skilled. This is a core competency of ours. And then we have a process that we go through, and we identify specific tasks, specific timelines, and specific outcomes. And we also look at and analyze, you know, the workloads and look for ways to maximize money. And then the technology, it's primarily native AWS tools as well as our proprietary dashboard that we have put together. And I'll show that here. But essentially what we're doing is we're looking at infrastructure, compute, and storage, looking for ways to optimize and right-size that stuff, making sure that your data transfer is the most cost-effective, and making sure that you've got the governance in place. We'll look at account structure, we'll look at service control policies, making sure that you've got the right baseline so that you can ensure that your environment is running the way it needs to. And then financial operations, optimizing costs and savings and stuff like that. And I know I'm running along on time, so I'm going to kind of speed it up here a little bit. But this is a view of our cost optimization intelligent dashboard. It includes monthly and daily overviews. This is a dashboard that Innovision built, and it can show commitment levels, ROI utilization, insights, billing, and forecasting. But what's also really cool about it is that it can display data based on all of the 90 areas that are in the cost and utilization report. So it's not as limited, it's way more robust than Cost Explorer, the native tool that AWS has, and allows you to sort data by any of those 90 fields. You can also filter down to the actual resource level or the resource name if you want to find a specific resource. So it's a great tool for that. Our process, basically, engagement process is about a 4 to 6 week process. After we initiate the project, we do a financial management phase. We review your environment, look for credits, create the dashboard, look at savings plans. We'll do an architectural review, identify cloud hygiene opportunities and quick wins that we can establish. We'll also look at future state recommendations that might require more effort, but could certainly save you money over time. And then we'll provide those back to you as our recommendations. I'm gonna take a breath there.
Thanks for that, David.
So, David, thank you. I love the SpongeBob graphic back there on that slide. That one just kills me every time, but I think it's so appropriate. So, yeah, why Innovision for cloud cost optimization? We've been at this a long time. We've got a lot of experience, which is the reason that we will guarantee savings of 30%. And we do that because we typically find more than 30%, obviously, for our for our clients. So we'll identify that and, execute on it if obviously if you want us to, which I'm sure you will. And then, save you that and more. The return on investment, we talked a lot about sort of short-term, long-term. In the short term, you'll get, significant savings, almost immediate, so very quick return on investment. And then, you can choose to, if you want to, spend some of that money with us, and we can do more for you over time that will save you even more over time. Because, as David was saying, if you can, spend a bit of money that saves you money then month after month and year after year, the total cost of ownership goes down and down, right? So this is what we typically do for our clients. And then AWS brings out new services and new ways of being more cost efficient, right? So we then integrate that for clients, where we've got ongoing relationships. So we are bringing insights and smarter tools. We built the dashboard that David was showing there. We continue to add to it and refine it because it helps our clients and also helps us move quickly to save you money, right? So that we can then move on and focus on the key applications where the money's being spent and get this done. Building this cost-saving culture is key, right? And whether it's you working with us long-term or in the short term, setting you up with the right sort of FinOps capabilities, architecture, governance, that gets integrated into your culture for years to come. And then that really is how all of this starts to make sense and becomes kind of second nature and a mindset for people. Obviously, David went over a lot there earlier. You could do quite a bit of this yourself, but I think quite frankly, or I know this to be true, by engaging with us, we're going to get it done quickly. And one of the points I made there at the beginning was every, second, minute, month that goes by, you've spent money and overspent in the cloud, and it's money you're not going to get back. So, we can come in and we can hit this hard and save you money. And, it's an effective way to go, and you've got the confidence that a group of people are coming in who know how to do this, right? So with that, I'll hand it back to Chris to wrap
So
up.
much. Yeah. So we have probably as engaged of a Q&A as I've seen, and we've been doing this for quite some time. So we'll try to get to as many of these questions as we possibly can. And thank you so much for asking them. But really quickly, I just wanted to share some ways that you can engage with us. If this cost optimization approach and the associated guarantee sounds compelling to you, we can start there, or we could host a well-architected review for you where we take a more comprehensive look at your AWS environment and really find other opportunities, not only to save you money, but to enhance security and really make sure you're optimized. We can also do a AWS Immersion Day, which is really, we're certified to deliver the AWS Immersion Day experience, which is really hands-on labs for you and your team to make sure that you're getting that experience in a sandbox environment, so to speak, to make sure that you really have that hands-on experience coupled with our certified AWS architects and solution engineers walking you through the process so you can have a great deal of confidence as you move forward in your cloud strategy. So it's very easy to find our contact form on InterVision.com, but if you really want to speak to someone today, the email there is the best contact. She will get you connected with one of our experts immediately, and you can start that conversation right away. So with all that said, we did have quite a few questions. I'm going to try to get to them as quickly as I can. Either John or David, just call it out if it sounds like you're better equipped for one or the other. So first question here, what types of security risks for the flexible plans, such as reserved, savings, and spot plans? So I think they're asking about, are there security risks associated? And they say, is there a higher chance of having security gaps with or without the flexible plans?
So let me take that, and then David can chime in if necessary. RIs and savings plans are really sort of discounting methods, so they're not changes to your technical architecture. So it's kind of like having discount coupons that you're applying to your bill. So it's not going to have any security impact. Spot instances are a bit different in that you've got to have the right kind of architecture in place to be able to take advantage of spot instances. You need typically to have an architecture that's stateless, that's checkpoint restartable, or you've got workloads that just simply can be stopped, at very quick notice. That's not inherently a security issue, but if you're making changes to your architecture in order to allow it to be, take advantage of spot, when you start making changes to an architecture, that's when you need to test for security. So that I don't see any sort of inherent security issues with any of this. But if you're making changes, security is always job zero for us. So we're always going to retest things for security, even above cost savings. So it's a good question, but I don't think there's much to worry about. So.
Thanks, John. The next one was about automation of tagging. I know that automation is a big part of the way we deliver many of our services, but are there available tools around automating tagging, or is that more of a manual process?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I mean, it really depends on how you deploy your applications. Of course, if you use a CloudFormation template, you can specify tags in that, and that can get it done, right off the bat. But if you've got a situation where you need to go back and want to retag resources, then yeah, what you're doing is you can use a tool called Tag Editor, which can actually go in and add tags on an individual basis to EC2 instances or other resources that don't have tags applied. You can also use bulk tagging if you want to apply a bulk tag approach to, let's say, all instances in a specific account or a specific business unit. But one of the things that we do in the service, and this is critical, is tag remediation. So step one is, what is your tag strategy? Identify what that is. Then go through, apply that, and then find out what resources don't have tags applied, and then remediate them. And 90% of that work is easy and fast, and then there's always that 10% of, okay, I gotta track down who's the owner of this resource, right? But that's the kind of thing that you really only have to do once. And then once you've got those tools in place to ensure that you've got a great tagging policy that's enforceable going forward, you never really have to do that again. So, but yeah, there are a couple of tools that you can use, bulk tag updates and Tag Editor, to remediate tags.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, David. I'm scrubbing through here. There's quite a few. There's a question related to T-series or burstable compute as options as well. And I think that was when you were talking about architecture, David. Can you speak to that at all?
T-series or burstable compute. Okay, could you give me the context of the question?
Sorry, it was a very short question.
So I think that may be instance type related. Scaling instance sizes down, perhaps.
So if you have a lot of changes, potential changes in your EC2 instance size, but you want to benefit from a committed savings plan, savings plans are the way to go, because you've got the ability to be flexible in terms of the instance size, and it's applied based on spend level. It's not tied to a specific EC2 instance. So there's no exchanging this for that. It's based on the spend. That's what I would recommend if you've got a situation where you expect to be changing EC2 instance sizes on a regular basis.
Great. Thank you, David. Had a question relevant to our experience in Azure. I know that we are also a Microsoft Gold partner, and that a lot of what we do here in AWS is also applicable to Azure as well. But John, did you want to speak to that? Do we have a comparable service that we can provide in Azure today?
We don't have a service with a guarantee like we have here. We do have the skill set to, with our group, our team, to do very similar things in Azure. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, contact us. We can help in Azure as well.
Great. I did have another question relevant to cost for the service. I can share that there is a one-time billable service engagement that we have, but we also, for qualified organizations, can perform this service for free, and then have a portion of the cost savings that we find for you come to InterVision. So that's another option for folks who are looking at this. I just wanted to share. I don't know if there's anything that either of you would want to share relevant to the way we price the offering.
Yeah, I think that to keep in mind with the free offering, it's essentially, if you will allow us to be your billing agent of record, and we do the invoicing in effect, then we can provide that as a free service. If you don't want to make any changes in how that's going, we can also do this as a fee-based service. But either way, the ROI is excellent. So we're happy to have a discussion and go through each one of those models with you, and then you can decide which makes the most sense.
Perfect. Yeah, there's some other questions. I know we're getting close on time here. I did want to mention, though, I'd be remiss without mentioning, if you're already working with an InterVision representative on the sales side, please feel free to reach out to them with any questions you have. They're very qualified to move you along and get you associated with the right person. And I just wanted to get that out there. The email there is for new folks. Our BDR coordinator, she can make sure you get on a call with the right expert here at InterVision if you're not currently working with a representative. There was a question that came in around differentiation against another offering out there. I can say that I think the guarantee is something that we all feel extremely confident in being a differentiator. You're not going to find that 30% guarantee. Please feel free to do your due diligence and do that research. So that's a big one. But guys, I think you could probably speak to a little bit about some of the differentiation we have in our approach that we maybe haven't touched on.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just throw one out here. I think that, some of the competition out there will purchase a CMP tool or something like that to use that as a way to keep an eye on savings plans and look for, zombie resources and stuff like that. We decided not to go that approach simply because the native AWS tools are so good and they basically do the same thing. And when you use a CMP, it usually adds 1 or 1.5 or 2% to your monthly spend. So we didn't want to go with that approach because the goal of this is to reduce your monthly spend. And if you can get the same information with native AWS tools that are free, that's our approach.
Well, and then for the people that sign up, we provide the dashboard. So.
Right, yeah, and that tool is proprietary to InterVision, so you're not going to find that dashboard anywhere else.
So, and we can customize, we have a way of customizing RIs and savings plans above and beyond, so, if you talk to us, there's a lot of things we can do that will provide unique value, so.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's see. There's one more question that came in, and then I will break here. So we're talking quite a bit about EC2 instances, S3 buckets, snapshots. What are you doing for consumable AWS services such as RDS and Aurora? Does your service provide visibility into those services and potential cost optimization?
Yeah, 100%. We'll look at everything that's on your AWS bill and we'll look for ways to save, especially in the database space. So RDS, Aurora, all those are ripe for cost optimization because they generally represent a significant portion of your spend. In addition, those resources also can be applied to specific savings plans or RIs, depending upon what they are. So we look at it not only from an architecture standpoint, but also from a committed purchase standpoint.
Perfect. Thank you so much, David. And with that, I think I may have missed a few questions. I do apologize. You guys were extremely engaged. Thank you so much. If I did happen to miss any, I'll make sure we reach out and tap you in case you want to have those questions answered. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We hope you found today's conversation insightful. There will be a recording made available. I saw a question come in about that for everyone who was in attendance today. And we hope you have a great day. And thanks again for carving time out for us. We really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.